Morning crept slowly over Dry Valley Ranch, brushing the worn fence lines and dusty barns with a pale amber glow. The wind was already restless, whispering across the thistle and sage, rattling the old windmill that had stood guard since Jack Boone's father first claimed this unforgiving land. Its wooden blades creaked in a slow, tired rhythm, like the heartbeat of a ranch held together by grit, sweat, and duty. Jack Boone stood at the center of the gathering, boots planted firmly in the reddish dirt, shoulders squared beneath a sun-faded coat. He was a tall man, hard-edged and steady, with a face carved by wind and work. Folks whispered that he was made of the same stubborn stone as the valley itself. Jack didn't show much emotion, never had, but every man there knew he carried the weight of the ranch like a yoke across his broad back. The cattle, the workers, the lingering drought, the fragile peace with the neighboring Apache lands, all of it sat on his shoulders, and he held it without complaint. The morning meeting had barely begun when Jack paused mid-sentence. His hand twitched, then pressed tight to his chest, his breath hitched in a sharp, ragged gasp. For a moment, the men thought he'd simply lost his footing on the uneven ground. But then his complexion blanched to a chalky, ashen gray. "Mr. Boone?" one man murmured. Jack staggered. Then the ranch owner, the man who never bowed to storm or hardship, collapsed hard into the dust, stirring a cloud of red earth beneath him. Panic erupted. Chairs clattered. Boots scrambled backward. Not one of them reached for him. Not one dared touch the legendary Jack Boone, frightened of making things worse, or simply terrified of responsibility. "Somebody, do something!" a ranch hand yelled, though he didn't move an inch. Jack lay still, breath shallow, eyes fluttering. And then cutting through the chaos came the thudding of hurried footsteps. Maya appeared at the barn doorway, a young Apache woman with dark braided hair threaded with small feathers and beadwork, her skin sun-kissed from long days working the stables. She had been mucking stalls when she heard the shouting. She didn't hesitate. While the others froze, Maya dove to her knees beside Jack, dust swirling around her skirt as she pressed her ear to his chest. Her heartbeat quickened. His was fading. "What the hell is she doing?" someone barked. Maya didn't answer. Her hands moved with instinctive, desperate precision, pressing firmly against Jack's sternum, keeping rhythm the way her mother taught her back in the tribal camp. Breath, pressure, breath again. Her lips trembled, not with fear, but with fierce determination. "Get her off of him!" a ranch hand shouted, voice sharp with disgust. "Don't let that Apache girl touch the boss!" But Maya ignored him, focusing only on the faint thud beneath her palms. "Come on," she whispered through her teeth, voice strained yet steady. "Breathe. Breathe, you stubborn man." A shadow loomed behind her. Before she could react, a heavy blow crashed between her shoulders. The bang slammed into her back, sending pain streaking through her ribs. She fell forward, hands splayed in the dirt. Dust clung to her cheek, her breath knocked from her lungs. "Get back, girl," the man snarled. But even through the shock, Maya forced herself upright. Her spine screamed, her vision blurred. But she crawled forward again, placing her hands back over Jack's chest. Her muscles shook violently, yet she pushed down, again and again, refusing to let him slip away. "Stop her!" "No, leave him alone! She's gonna kill him!" The shout swirled like a storm. Maya kept going. And then, a gasp. Jack Boone's body jolted beneath her touch. His chest rose, fell, then rose again, steadier this time. A stunned silence washed over the men. "Son of a, he's breathing." But the silence didn't last. By sundown, after Jack had been carried inside, the foreman approached Maya with cold eyes and a folded piece of paper she never even opened. "You're done here," and he said. "Mr. Boone wouldn't approve of what you did." Maya's injured back throbbed with every breath. She didn't argue. People like her never won arguments here. She walked away from the ranch with nothing but her small bundle of clothes and the sting of dust in her eyes. The setting sun stretched long shadows across the valley, turning the world bronze and lonely. Her steps left faint marks in the dirt, marks the wind would soon erase. Behind her, Dry Valley Ranch carried on as if nothing had changed. But something had. Only no one yet understood that the girl they cast out had just saved the life of the man who held the whole valley together. Maya didn't look back. The horizon ahead glowed with the last light of day, but she felt none of its warmth. Her back burned, her heart ached hollow, and the Wild West swallowed her footsteps as night settled over the land. Dry Valley was the kind of place where dust carried stories faster than the wind. By the next morning, the truth of what happened in Jack Boone's ranch yard had already twisted into something uglier, sharper, like barbed wire left out to rust. Folks talked as if they had been standing right there, as if their eyes had seen more than their own fear. "Did you hear?" Someone murmured at the general store. "That Apache girl tried something on Jack when he was down. Nasty business. Those people ain't right." A woman clutching a sack of flour chimed in with a trembling gasp. "They say she threw herself over him, like she was claiming him." Men nodded, though none had been there. The story grew teeth, then claws, then a wicked, poisonous breath. No one mentioned how the others stood frozen. No one mentioned the bang sung striking Maya's back. No one mentioned she saved Jack Boone's life. Dry Valley never needed facts to build a fire. It only needed kindling, and prejudice had always been the driest wood around. Maya felt the shift in the air long before she heard the words. People who once ignored her now stared openly, their expressions lined with contempt. The blacksmith, who had occasionally tossed her leftover scraps, shut his window when she walked past. Women pulled their children closer, whispering sharply under their breath. At the feed store, she tried to ask for work. Anything. Hauling grain, sweeping the floors, mucking out stables. The owner didn't even meet her eyes. "We don't hire trouble," he said, slamming the ledger shut. At another ranch along the valley, a foreman looked her over and scoffed. "You're that Apache girl from Boone's place. No thanks. Don't want drama on my land." At the sheriff's office, she stood quietly before the old wooden desk. Her posture was respectful, though her back still throbbed with every small movement. "Sheriff," she said softly, "I'm looking for work. Anything at all." Sheriff Harlow, gray-bearded and hard-eyed, didn't bother hiding his disdain. "This land ain't right for someone like you," he muttered, adjusting his hat without meeting her gaze. "Best keep your head low and stay out of town." Maya pressed her lips together, the words stinging despite her effort to stay composed. She walked out into the dust-blown street, the sun glaring down on her slender frame. Some cowboys lounging near the saloons spat into the dirt as she passed. "That her?" one muttered. "Yeah. Heard she tried something filthy on Jack Boone. Guess Apache ways ain't decent." Laughter followed her like a cruel echo. By evening, Maya returned to the little shack she shared with her younger sister, Leah, far beyond the town's edge. The place looked more like a weather-beaten trapper's hut than a home. Roof sagging, timber splitting, smoke barely finding its way through the crooked chimney. Still, it was the only shelter they had. Leah rushed forward when she saw Maya stumble inside. "Did you find work?" Mia's tired eyes flickered. "No." Her sister didn't ask why. There was no need. That night, Maya tried to sleep, but the pain in her back pulsed through her like a hot brand. The bruise from the bangs sung had deepened into a swollen purple wound. She pressed a damp cloth against it, but the fever crept in anyway. Slow, burning, merciless. Outside, the wind howled across the valley in long, mournful wails, rattling the loose boards of the shack. To Maya, it sounded like the distant cries of her ancestors, voices warning her, grieving for her, calling her home. Yet she felt further from home than ever. Each cough burned. Each breath carried the sharp scent of fear. She curled beneath the worn blanket, her thoughts drifting in and out of clarity. Leah sat beside her, wiping her forehead, trying not to cry. "Maya, maybe you shouldn't have helped him," her sister whispered. "People here don't care about the truth." Maya swallowed hard, the fever taking hold. Maybe I saved the wrong man," she murmured, voice trembling. It wasn't bitterness, it was heartbreak. Her hands that had pushed life back into Jack Boone's chest, now shook uncontrollably. Her vision blurred, and she felt as if the whole valley pressed its weight on her lungs. Dry Valley slept indifferent, but the stars above the desert shimmered quietly, as if they alone knew the truth. Maya had not failed. The valley had. And deep inside Jack Boone's ranch house, the man she saved was just beginning to wake, unaware of the storm growing around her name, unaware of the price she now paid for the breath he drew. Jack Boone woke to the low groan of the wind pushing against the ranch house walls, a sound both familiar and strangely hollow. The room was dim. Only a thin bar of morning light slipped through the half-closed shutters, cutting across the wooden floor. His chest rose shakily as he drew in a breath that felt deeper than the last one he remembered taking. But the room was quiet, too quiet. He pushed himself up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in his ribs. His head throbbed with a dull, echoing ache. But one thing pierced through the haze, a voice, soft, urgent, trembling with desperation. "Don't give up, please, breathe." It haunted him like a fading song. Jack blinked the fog from his mind. Who was here?" he muttered. A ranch hand carrying a pitcher of water paused at the doorway. "Sir, you ought to rest. You took a mighty bad spell." Jack fixed him with a steady, flinty stare. "I asked who saved me." The man shifted uneasily. The crew handled it, sir. We got you inside soon as we could." "Which one of you revived me?" The ranch hand hesitated, a shade too long. "Hard to say. Everybody pitched in." Jack Boone had lived long enough to recognize the tone of a lie dressed as courtesy. He didn't push further. Not yet. But the emptiness in the room, the absence of any clear answer, gnawed at him like an old wound that refused to close. That afternoon, when the house finally cleared of visitors offering lukewarm well-wishes, Jack made his slow way to the office near the barn. His stride was controlled, deliberate, but there was a simmering suspicion beneath each step. He began with the ledgers. The foreman's handwriting was tidy, rigid, too rigid. On the page, dated the morning he collapsed, Jack found a short entry underlined twice. "Incident handled, all resolved." No explanation, no details. Just those vague, slippery words that said everything and nothing at all. Jack's jaw tightened. Next, he opened the storage chest at the corner of the stable. Fall blankets, saddle soap, old lantern parts, and then something that didn't belong there. A small cloth patterned with turquoise stitching and delicate beadwork. Apache made. Jack lifted it slowly between his fingers. The material was warm in color, soft but worn. Someone had dropped it in a hurry. Someone who shouldn't have been anywhere near him when he fell. A strange chill swept through him. "You're being lied to," a voice in his gut whispered. He summoned his staff. "Bring me the yard report," Jack ordered. "All of it. Guard logs, timestamps, witness notes. And if anything was recorded on the security phonograph, I want that too." The room stiffened. Men exchanged uneasy glances. But Jack Boone was not a man who repeated himself. Reluctantly, they gathered what he requested. Clip notes scribbled on cheap paper, a cracked leather-bound logbook, a small audio cylinder used for official ranch business. Jack set the cylinder into the phonograph and turned the crank. Static crackled. Then came a voice, a panicked one, shouting for help. Another yelling to back away. A scuffle, the sharp impact of a blow. And beneath all the chaos was a sound that twisted Jack's expression into something dark and cold. A woman crying through her breath, forcing out words between gasps. "Come on, stay with me. Breathe, you stubborn man." Jack froze. He knew that voice. Though he had never heard it clearly before, something inside him recognized the tone. Steady, unyielding, desperate in a way that came from real courage, not impulse. Then he saw her in the guard's written statements and sketch diagrams. Maya, the Apache stable girl. She had knelt beside him. She had fought to keep him alive. She had taken a blow meant to stop her and kept going anyway. And after all that, they had thrown her out. Jack closed his eyes, fighting the slow burn rising in his chest. Anger, not the wild, reckless kind, but the deep, righteous fury of a man who had witnessed injustice carved into his land without his consent. He opened his eyes again, cold and sharp as January steel. "They dismissed her," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "They dismissed her after she saved my life?" No one answered. They didn't have to. Jack Boone stood tall, the room suddenly too small for the storm building inside him. His decision formed with absolute clarity, hard and immovable as the valley cliffs. "Bring my horse," he ordered, "now." "Sir, you're still weak." "I'm not asking for permission." His voice reverberated through the barn. Jack grabbed his coat from the hook, ignoring the tug in his chest. He didn't care about pain, didn't care about risk. There was only one truth left in him. A girl who had no reason to help him, had fought harder for his life than any man on his payroll, and she had paid the price. Not anymore. Jack stepped into the fading sunlight, jaw set like a man riding toward judgment. He would find Maya. He would set this right, no matter what the valley whispered. The prairie stretched wide and empty beneath a sky streaked with sun-bleached clouds. Jack Boone rode alone, the steady thud of his horse's hooves echoing across the dusty plain. He didn't take a wagon or a guide. He didn't wait for the fever in his chest to settle. The moment he learned what had been done to Maya, he saddled up and rode into the wind, like a man haunted by a debt too heavy to ignore. The land between Dry Valley Ranch and the scattered Apache settlements was harsh. Long miles of brittle grass, thorny brush, and quiet stretches where even the wind held its breath. Jack knew most men from his world avoided this direction, not because of danger, but because pride and prejudice had carved invisible borders no one dared cross. But Jack Boone was not most men. The closer he rode, the more the landscape changed. Smoke curled from small distant fires. Hide tents and weather-worn shacks dotted the edge of a shallow canyon. Children watched from behind rocks, their dark eyes wary. Women halted their chores to follow him with guarded gazes. Jack removed his hat out of respect. "I'm looking for a girl named Maya," he said gently to an older woman near a cooking pit. Her expression hardened instantly. She pointed toward the trail with a sharp, dismissive motion. "We don't need trouble from white men." Her voice was cold, clipped, like someone who had learned long ago not to trust a stranger's intention. Jack nodded, accepting the sting. "I don't aim to bring trouble. I'm here to set right what my men broke." For a heartbeat, something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe even curiosity. But she said nothing more. Instead, she jerked her chin toward a narrow path leading deeper into the settlement's outskirts. Jack urged his horse forward. He soon reached a small cluster of shacks, each one barely clinging to what could be called shelter. The third one caught his attention. Its crooked door hung by a single hinge, swaying when the wind sighed through. The roof sagged inward, threatening to collapse. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney. Jack felt a knot form in his stomach, tight, heavy, unforgiving. He dismounted and stepped closer. A small figure appeared in the doorway. A girl no older than 12, thin as a reed and trembling beneath a patched shawl. Her eyes, big, frightened, and far too knowing for her age, locked onto Jack with a mix of fear and desperation. "You're Maya's sister," he said softly. She nodded once, swallowing hard. "Is she here?" The girl's lips quivered. She won't wake up." Her voice cracked like dry wood. "I don't know what to do anymore." Jack felt the ground tilt beneath him. "Let me see her," he whispered. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sickness, a heavy, feverish heat that clung to the walls. The small room held little but a straw bed, a chipped water bowl, and a tattered blanket. Maya lay curled beneath it, her breathing shallow, her skin pale except for two burning patches of fever staining her cheeks. Her dark hair clung to her forehead, damp with sweat. Jack knelt beside her. Her back, what he could see of it, was swollen and bruised, the mark of the brutal strike she had taken while saving him. The wound had darkened with infection, angry and inflamed. She looked smaller somehow, a shadow of the fierce girl who had fought to breathe life back into his lungs. "Maya," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "What did they do to you?" Her sister stood in the corner silently, fists clenched, eyes watery. "She kept saying she didn't regret helping you," the girl whispered. "But then she got sick, and she got worse so fast." Jack swallowed, his throat thick with guilt. "She saved me, and this is what she was given in return." Without another word, he slid his arms beneath Maya's fragile body. She was frighteningly light, like lifting a bundle of withered grass. Her head fell gently against his chest, her breath barely warm against his shirt. Her sister gasped softly. "Where are you taking her?" Jack rose to his full height, holding Maya as if she were made of something precious and breakable. "To the ranch," he said firmly. "She'll get help, I swear it." Then quieter, as though promising both the girl and the very land beneath his feet, "If this valley still has a shred of justice left in it, she will have it first." With Maya cradled in his arms, Jack stepped back into the wind. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in deepening gold, and the prairie stretched before him like a long, unforgiving road. But Jack Boone no longer cared. He had a life to return, a wrong to make right, and a girl to bring back from the edge of death. Maya woke slowly, as though surfacing from a deep river she had nearly drowned in. Her eyelids were heavy, her breath thin, but the air around her no longer tasted like dust and fever. It was clean, warm. The faint smell of cedar wood clung to the room, mingling with the soft glow of an oil lamp burning on a bedside table. She blinked, The ceiling above her was smooth, sanded pine, not the cracked, smoke-stained boards of her shack. A thick quilt covered her, far softer than anything she had ever owned. Confusion rippled through her like a shiver. Where am I? Her heartbeat quickened, but before panic could rise, she heard the sound of a chair shift. Jack Boone sat beside the bed, elbows propped on his knees, his weathered hands clasped together. His face, so often stern and unreadable, now carried something different, an expression she didn't have a name for. A mix of worry, relief, and something heavier. Guilt, maybe. He looked up when he sensed her gaze. "You're awake," he said quietly. Maya opened her mouth, her voice barely a rasp. Why did you bring me here?" Jack straightened, letting out a slow breath as though he'd been carrying the question inside himself. "Because you saved my life. Because you fought for it harder than any man I've ever hired." His eyes darkened, grief flickering beneath the surface. "And because I owe you more than I can ever repay." Maya stared at him, stunned. Her thoughts scattered like dry leaves. "I didn't think," she whispered, "that you'd want anything to do with me." "That's the problem," Jack said, leaning back. "You should never have thought that. You were wronged, Maya. Badly." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. Edges crisp, ink still fresh. He set it gently on the blanket. "It's he said. "Your name cleared of every lie told about you, signed by me." Maya hesitated before unfolding it. Her hands trembled. In bold handwriting, with Jack Boone's unmistakable signature beneath it, the words read, "Maya is innocent of misconduct. She is the reason I am alive." Her breath hitched. Jack continued, voice steady but edged with steel. "I've fired the foreman who helped spread the lies, and every man who raised a hand against you will answer for it. That's a promise." Maya swallowed, her eyes burning. No one had ever defended her before, not like this, not with action, not with truth. Still, part of her couldn't believe it. "You went through all that trouble?" she whispered. "For me?" Jack nodded once. "For you." Silence filled the room, warm, fragile. Then he cleared his throat, as if preparing himself for something more difficult than paperwork or justice. "I don't want you working the barns anymore," he said. She stiffened. "Then why bring me back?" Jack shook his head. "Not because you're unfit, because you deserve better than mucking stalls for men who treat you like you don't belong." He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "I want you in a new role here, one I can't fill myself." Maya frowned. "What role?" "A counselor," he answered. "For the folks who work under me but never find their voice. The laborers, the outcasts, the ones like you. You understand them better than anyone. You know their struggle, their fear." He paused. "And you have more strength than most men I've known." Maya stared at him, disbelieving. "You would trust me with something like that? A girl you hardly know? A girl people here don't even want?" Jack held her gaze, his expression unwavering. "I trust the person who hauled me back from death's door," he said softly. "I trust the girl who risked everything, her job, her safety, to save me." Then after a moment of quiet, "I trust you, Maya." Her breath trembled. A single truth pressed on her heart, heavy with fear and hope. "But I'm Apache," she whispered. "Most men like you don't trust my people." Jack's eyes softened, not with pity, but with conviction. "I don't judge a person by blood," he said. "I judge them by their actions." He leaned closer, voice low and earnest. "And you saved my life. That's all I need to know." Maya turned her face away, overwhelmed. The storm she'd been trapped in for days, fear, fever, despair, seemed to loosen its grip. Outside, wind rattled softly against the window. But inside the room, something steadier was beginning to take root. Jack stood slowly, adjusting his coat. "Rest tonight," he said gently. "We'll talk more in the morning." As he stepped toward the door, Maya found her voice. Jack." He paused. "Thank you," she whispered. He tipped his hat just slightly before leaving her in the warm, sheltering glow of the oil lamp. And for the first time in many nights, Maya drifted into sleep without fear trailing her into the dark. For the first time in her life, Maya walked the grounds of Dry Valley Ranch with her head lifted. Not in defiance, but in a quiet attempt to understand the world Jack was asking her to help change. The sun sat high above the plains, casting long shadows across the corral fences and weathered barns. Cattle lowed in the distance. Men shouted orders over the grind of wagon wheels. Dust rose in soft, swirling clouds with every step. She watched. She listened. And what she saw tightened something inside her. Behind the bustle, behind the noise and movement, she observed the quieter truths most men ignored. A group of older ranch hands loaded hay far past what their backs could bear. No one offered help. A young boy, barely 12, scrubbed troughs until his fingers turned raw. A woman sweeping the porch of the bunkhouse paused and winced, rubbing a bruise partially hidden beneath her sleeve. No one complained. No one dared. This was the cost of keeping a job on the outskirts of the powerful Boone Ranch. You worked until your bones rattled, and you kept your mouth shut about anything that hurt. Maya felt those scenes like small stones pressing into her ribs. She knew what it meant to survive in silence. But silence didn't come easily today. As she walked across the yard, two ranch hands straightened from unloading crates. Their expressions sharpened the moment they recognized her. "Well, look who's strutting around," one muttered with a mocking grin. "The Apache girl who worked her way into the boss's good graces." His companion snorted. "Heard she did more than that. Folks in town are still talking." Their laughter was low and oily, seeping under her skin. Maya's throat tightened. She kept walking, though her hands had begun to tremble. "Hey," one called after her. "You gonna teach us all how to trick the boss too?" A hot sting spread through her chest. She bit down hard on the inside of her cheek, forcing her steps to stay even. These were the voices she feared most. Not because of the cruelty in them, but because of the memories they stirred. She had heard those tones her whole life, the taunts, the suspicion, the easy assumption that everything wrong was somehow her people's fault. She had run from such voices before, but Jack wanted her to stay. Later that afternoon, she found him waiting near the newly built row of structures at the ranch's edge. Sunlight painted the rough-hewn beams in a warm, honey-like glow. The building was simple but sturdy, a clear contrast to the sagging shacks like the one she had lived in. Jack gestured toward it. "This is what I wanted to show you," he said. "A new office, a new starting point." She blinked. "For who?" "For you," Jack answered without hesitation. Maya stepped inside. The scent of fresh-cut lumber filled the air. A desk sat near the window. Shelves lined one wall. There was even a coat rack and a small stove in the corner for cold nights. It felt unreal. "This is where you'd work," Jack continued. "A place to speak with folks, hear their problems, help me figure out how to run this ranch without men getting trampled by those above them." He paused, letting the moment settle. "If you agree," he added quietly, "you'll help me change more than this ranch. You'll help me change the way this whole valley treats people like you." Maya's breath caught, because with that offer came a weight she wasn't sure she could lift. She stepped away from the desk, staring out the window at the open field stretching endlessly toward the horizon. She remembered the bruises on her back. She remembered the fear in her sister's eyes. She remembered generations of her people pushed to the edge of the valley, surviving off scraps of respect. Standing here, the ache inside her deepened. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. People look at me like I'm dirt, like I'm something wrong." Jack folded his arms, leaning against the doorway. "People fear what they refuse to understand. But you, Maya, you understand more than they ever will." Tears stung at the corners of her eyes. She shook her head slowly. "I'm scared, Jack. More scared of their eyes than I ever was of hunger." He nodded, the lines around his eyes softening. "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've lived through enough to know what's at stake." She turned to face him fully, heart pounding. "And if I stand up," she said, voice unsteady, "I do it not just for me, but for my people. For every Apache kid who grows up thinking they ain't worth nothing." Jack's smile was small, gentle, sincere, but it warmed the room like a rising sun. "That," he said, "is exactly why I chose you." Maya inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her future settle onto her shoulders. Then she spoke the words that would redraw the lines of her life. "If I take this job, I'll do it the Apache way, with my people's strength, with their truth." Jack's smile widened, not triumphant, but proud. "That," he replied, "is the thing I was hoping to hear." And just like that, somewhere deep in the heart of Dry Valley Ranch, a spark of change began to glow, faint but strong enough to survive the wind. Dry Valley had always been a place where rumors rode faster than truth. And on the first cold morning of early fall, trouble came riding back into town like a storm front with a mean grin. Brigham, angry, bitter, still smelling of whiskey and wounded pride, slipped through the saloon doors and started spreading poison with the ease of a man who'd done it all his life. "Maya's a thief," he muttered loud enough for half the bar to hear. "She's been doing those Apache curses. Sick things." The words rolled off his tongue, slick and venomous, catching listeners like burrs on wool. And though he had been thrown off Jack's land, humiliation made him dangerous. He wanted someone, anyone, to feel smaller than he felt. By sundown, the lies had taken root. At the Dry Valley Saloon, cowhands hunched over their drinks, whispering through crooked teeth. Ranch wives trading flour and beans at the general store kept glancing toward the hills where Jack's ranch stood, concerns sharpened by prejudice. Young cowboys, too eager to look tough and too empty-headed to know better, laughed and repeated Brigham's words like gospel. Truth traveled slow in this country, but fear galloped. When word reached the ranch, Jack felt that familiar burn of fury climb up his spine. He'd seen what hatred looked like, how quickly it could turn a person into a target, and he wasn't about to lose Maya to the town's ignorance. He found Maya outside her temporary office cabin, sorting through supply ledgers and notes from laborers. She carried herself with calm discipline, but underneath that quiet resilience was a woman who knew exactly how sharp a crowd's judgment could be. "Maya," Jack said, jaw tight, "I'll speak to the ranch hands myself. I'll shut this down before it grows any further." But she shook her head slowly. Her dark eyes, still tender from recent pain yet fierce with dignity, met his. "No, Jack. If you speak for me, I stay small. I stay the girl they think needs rescuing. Let me answer them. Let me be the one to cut through the lies." "Maya, they might not listen," he warned. Her voice stayed steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "Maybe not, but they'll hear me." The next day, Jack called a gathering in the ranch yard. Workers from every bunkhouse came, some curious, some doubtful, some hardened from years of doing whatever the loudest man in the room told them to do. The sun hung low, throwing long shadows across the dusty ground. Maya stepped forward. Her back was straight, though beneath her shirt, the old welted scars from Brigham's beating still throbbed. She looked impossibly small in front of all those men, yet something powerful radiated from her. An unwavering steadiness born from surviving more than any of them would ever know. She began speaking in a low, clear voice. She told them how she'd been accused of wrongdoing simply because she was Apache, how she was struck down the night she saved the boss's life, how fear had chased her through brushlands and ruined huts, how she had dreamed desperately of a place where her people could be seen as human beings rather than shadows to blame. Each sentence hit the yard like a hammer, sharp, honest, unavoidable. "You call me a thief," she said, her voice rising. "You say I used some dark Apache magic, but I only used my hands to save a man's life. And I only used my courage to come back here, hoping truth mattered more than old lies." Silence pooled across the yard. The wind rustled through the cottonwoods. Boots shifted restlessly in the dirt. Then slowly, a tall ranch hand with weathered skin and tired eyes stepped forward. He was past 60, bones aching from decades under the sun. His voice cracked from disuse. "She's telling the truth," he said. "I saw how that foreman treated her, saw the bruises he left. That girl's got more grit than any of us." Another man nodded, then another. It spread like wildfire, quiet agreement turning into spoken support. The tide shifted. Brigham, red-faced and cornered, sputtered angry curses until Jack and two ranch hands escorted him off the property and warned him never to set foot in Dry Valley again. By dusk, the man was nothing more than a silhouette disappearing on horseback across the barren ridge. As the crowd dispersed, Maya stood still, breathing hard, the weight of her words settling into her bones. For the first time, the ranch hands didn't just look at her, they saw her. Jack stepped closer, voice low and full of something almost reverent. "You did more today than I ever could." Maya stared at the empty yard, where fear had just transformed into something fragile but real. "Maybe," she whispered, "this land is finally learning to listen." The morning after Brigham was driven out, Dry Valley Ranch felt strangely quiet, like a field after lightning strikes, waiting to see what might rise from scorched soil. The sun climbed slow and golden, laying its warm light over the barns, the cattle pens, and the distant cottonwoods whispering in the breeze. Something in the air felt different, not settled, not safe, but possible. Maya did not waste a single dawn. With the same disciplined focus she once used to track injured animals in her homeland, She began walking every corner of the ranch, observing, listening, taking notes. She paid attention to the worn-out boots, the sunburnt faces, the bruised hands of laborers who had never been given a voice. She recognized struggle instantly. She had lived inside it too long. By the second week, she transformed an abandoned tack shed into a rest shelter, a cool place where laborers could escape the brutal noon heat, find water, cloth bandages, and a cot to breathe on. She organized a common kitchen, stocked with basic food that no man or woman had to beg for. She secured medicine, the simple kind that shortens fever or cleans wounds, things her own people often lacked. Then she taught. Under the open sky, she showed ranch hands how to wrap an injured ankle, how to cool a heat-stricken worker, how to stop bleeding with pressure, and calm hands. The same knowledge that had saved Jack's life now became something she shared freely, boldly. Anyone can learn this, she said, and everyone should. At first, a few men scoffed, but curiosity spread quicker than pride, and soon cowhands were crowding around her, absorbing every steady, patient instruction she gave. Little by little, Dry Valley Ranch began to feel less like a machine that used people, and more like a place where people mattered. Jack and Maya became an unlikely pair, so unlikely that even the passing stagecoach drivers whispered about it. Jack, the rugged ranch owner, once cold as Riverstone, respected for his authority and feared for his temper. Maya, the young Apache woman who rose from suspicion, bruises, and slander to stand as the moral backbone of the entire operation. But together they fit. Where Jack's voice carried weight, Mia's carried clarity. Where Jack made decisions with blunt efficiency, Mia made them with insight born from hardship and cultural resilience. Where he commanded from the front, she built from the ground. They reminded folks of something old ranchers used to say: rain shapes the land, but the land shapes the rain. Jack was the land, solid, rooted. Maya was the rain, restorative, surprising, life-giving. In meetings with the workers, Jack spoke plainly. If Maya says it needs changing, it changes. And when the two walked the yard side by side, it was the first time people in Dry Valley saw leadership not built on power alone, but on trust, earned the hard way. At first, the rest of the valley watched with raised eyebrows and murmurs. Some were skeptical, some were resentful. But results have a way of silencing doubters. A month passed. Injuries dropped. Productivity climbed. Workers stayed instead of drifting from ranch to ranch, seeking better treatment. Dry Valley Ranch turned into a model of efficiency not through fear, but through fairness. Then something extraordinary happened. Other ranches began to copy them. A small cattle outfit near the foothills set up a shared bunkhouse after seeing how Jack's new system boosted morale. A wheat farm down south hired 2 Apache men full-time, without slurs, without backdoor conditions, after hearing how Maya had reorganized labor distribution. A neighboring ranch asked if she could train their workers in first aid. Slowly, almost shyly, change seeped into the town like warm spring water into cracked earth. For the first time in memory, Apache families walked into Dry Valley's general store without being shoved back out. Young men found work without being spat at. Women could trade herbs, beadwork, or crafted goods without being mocked. The town wasn't transformed overnight. Old prejudice still clung like dust on boots. But where before there had been only closed doors, now there were windows cracked open, letting in the kind of light that makes people rethink what they thought they knew. And every evening, when the ranch lights flickered warm across the twilight, Maya would pause, listening to the quiet hum of a place, finally learning how to breathe. Jack would step beside her. "You did this," he'd say. Maya would shake her head gently. "No, we did this. The land changed because you let it." He looked out over Dry Valley, lands inherited through pain and reclaimed through courage, and realized she was right. Change had started as a whisper. Now it was a growing root, steady and unstoppable. 6 months passed like wind sweeping across the mesas. Quiet, steady, carrying the scent of change across Dry Valley. What had once been a ranch weighed down by suspicion and bitterness now breathed with a new kind of life. Workers laughed more freely, cattle grazed in peaceful rhythm, and even the dusty paths between the barns seemed lighter, as if the land itself had shaken off an old burden. And Maya, she had transformed. Her stride was firm, almost regal in its assuredness. The timid girl who once kept her eyes low and her shoulders tense had become someone who spoke with a clear, steady voice. Someone shaped by hardship but not broken by it. Her strength was no longer the quiet endurance of someone trying to survive. It had become the confident fire of someone who believed she deserved her place here. She stood taller now, her long dark braids carrying beads of turquoise that shimmered whenever sunlight caught them. The workers often whispered that she looked like a sunrise, warm, impossible to ignore, a promise that the next day would be better than the last. Children from nearby homesteads ran to her when she walked past, eager to help carry baskets or listen to her stories about the old ways. Even elders nodded respectfully when she crossed the yard, something no Apache woman had ever received from the townsfolk before. Jack noticed every bit of it, and it stirred something in him, something proud, steady, protective, and quietly humbled. As spring gave way to early summer, Dry Valley Ranch prepared for a rare celebration. Word had spread across the town and beyond. Today would be the first workers' gathering, a day dedicated to honoring every hand that kept the ranch alive. No ranch around these parts had ever bothered with such a thing, but Maya insisted on it, and Jack backed her without hesitation. By mid-afternoon, the ranch yard buzzed with life. Tables made from wagon planks stood beneath cottonwood shade. Fresh bread, roasted meat, beans simmered in cast-iron pots, food rich enough to make even the weariest cowhands smile. Lanterns hung from beams, ready to glow when dust settled. The air felt vibrant, almost celebratory, like the valley itself was holding its breath. Then Maya stepped forward. A hush rolled through the crowd as she climbed a small wooden platform. Even the wind paused. Her presence commanded attention, not through force, but through authenticity, through the weight of lived truth. She looked over the sea of faces, Mexican laborers, Irish herders, Apache families, white ranch hands, all standing shoulder to shoulder for the first time in the history of this land. Her voice rose, calm, earnest, but powerful enough to reach every corner of the yard. "You all know what this valley used to be," she began. "A place where fear traveled faster than kindness. A place where someone's blood or skin or last name chose their future for them." Hands folded, some heads bowed. Jack watched the crowd soften, old scars flickering behind their eyes. "But we changed that," she continued. "Not because one person wanted it, but because many of you were brave enough to try something new, to believe fairness wasn't a myth, to treat each other like neighbors instead of strangers." Her gaze lifted toward the distant ridge, glowing under the late sun. "My people have a saying, the land listens to the hearts of those who walk it. This land has listened. It has changed because we changed." Jack stood behind her, his broad frame silent but unwavering. Pride radiated from him, not the boastful kind, but the deep, grateful pride of a man who knew he had witnessed something historic. Something that redeemed not only his ranch, but a part of himself he'd long buried under duty, grief, and stubborn silence. Maya placed one hand over her chest, her fingers brushing the turquoise necklace she wore as a symbol of resilience. "Dry Valley is no longer the place where an Apache girl was blamed for saving a man's life," she said gently. "It has become the place where people tell a different story, a truer story." A murmur rippled through the crowd, warm, respectful, almost reverent. She smiled then, soft but strong, illuminated by the late afternoon sun like a flame rising from the red dust. "They say a girl from the Apache people saved the rancher and changed the valley." Jack felt the words settle deep inside him, heavy with truth and hope. His jaw tightened, not from anger, but from emotion he rarely let himself feel. Because the valley had changed, and he knew the story wasn't finished yet. Not for her, not for him, not for the land that connected them. Behind the applause that rose like rolling thunder, the sky stretched wide and brilliant over Dry Valley, inviting them toward whatever came next. Morning settled gently over Dry Valley, soft as a prayer whispered into waking earth. A silver mist rolled across the prairie, drifting low over the grass until the sun began to pull it upward in slow glowing ribbons. The wooden porch of the ranch house creaked lightly as Jack Boone stepped out, boots brushing against the cool boards. He drew in a steady breath, the kind a man takes when he feels the day beginning not just outside him, but inside too. Maya stood already at the railing, her silhouette calm against the pale gold horizon. Her long braids swayed in the faint breeze, beads catching the newborn light like tiny sparks. Below them, the herd moved in the early hush, tails flicking, hooves whispering through the dew-soaked grass. It was a peaceful sound, honest, grounding, unpretentious. The kind of sound that made a man rethink what mattered. Jack stepped beside her. There was no distance between rancher and worker anymore. No stone wall of unspoken rules. Just two souls standing shoulder to shoulder on land, both of them had paid for in very different kinds of pain. "Quiet morning," he murmured. "Good kind of quiet," she replied, voice warm but edged with that Apache steadiness. Sharp, sure, and true. For a long moment, they simply watched the horses grazing in the soft, creamy light. The valley looked different now, not because the land had changed, but because the people living on it finally had. What once felt tense and brittle had become a place where footsteps didn't echo with fear, where names weren't whispered with suspicion, where dignity was no longer something rationed out like water in drought. Jack swallowed, the weight of everything they'd lived through pressing gently on his chest. He wasn't a man who spoke deeply without reason, but this morning felt like a chapter closing, and another one waiting just beyond the ridge. "Maya," he said quietly, "you didn't just save me that day." His voice wavered, rich with vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to hear. "You saved this ranch. You saved the people who depend on it. And you saved something in me I thought was long gone." Maya didn't turn right away. She let the words settle like dust on warm soil. Then she faced him, eyes dark, steady, knowing. The kind of gaze that peeled away a man's armor without ever being unkind. "Jack," she said softly, "no one changes a valley alone." Her voice was small but carried sharp, clear strength, the kind her ancestors had walked with long before these lands were fenced. "People change," as she continued, "when they have the courage to stand beside someone they're told to fear. And you stood next to me when the whole valley watched." Jack exhaled, deeply moved. He had faced storms, loss, long nights of regret, but nothing humbled him the way her quiet truths did. A warm gust drifted across the porch, carrying the faint cry of an eagle somewhere high above the sunlit ridge. The sound lifted through the valley like a blessing, ancient and wild. Mia tilted her head slightly, listening, not with her ears but with something deeper. For the first time since she set foot on Dry Valley Ranch, a small, unguarded smile curved her lips. Not the careful smile she used with strangers, not the polite smile she wore when stepping into uncertain spaces, but a true smile, unburdened, rooted, belonging. The kind of smile that said she did not feel like an outsider anymore. Jack saw it, and something in him eased, like a knot that had been tied too tight for too long, finally loosening. Below them, the valley stretched open and bright. Workers emerged from bunkhouses, their laughter rolling across the field. Apache families walked freely beside ranch hands. Children chased each other through the grass, leaving trails in the morning dew. No walls, no lines. Just a new kind of community growing from the same soil that once held bitterness. Dry Valley woke that morning as a different land. A land where an Apache girl had changed the story. A land where a hardened rancher had learned to listen. A land where two unlikely souls had stood together and shifted the horizon. Jack glanced at Maya again. "Ready for whatever comes next?" he asked. She nodded, eyes bright with something fierce and hopeful. "As long as we stand together," she said, "this valley will never go back to what it was." And with the sun rising over the ridge, pouring gold across the porch, Dry Valley opened its new chapter, one written not by fear or prejudice, but by courage, grace, and two hearts that learned to trust the same wind. The West was wide, and for the first time it felt wide open for both of them.